To begin with, here's the data I'll be working with. It's a small table where I have an item column and an item number column. And I want to be able to filter my table based on either the item or the item number. And I also want an error message if my user forgets to type in a filter. My idea is that I want to have a cell here where I can type in if I want to filter based on the item name, and here if I want to filter it based on item number. But I also want to have an error message in case I can't find it. So if I have entered no value inside either of these cells, then I want a value here to say, hey, you should probably add a filter if you want to filter. My preparation is I've turned these two cells into named ranges, filter name and filter value, and then I've loaded them into Power Query, where I simply say Excel current workbook, the name is the name of the named range, content first row, and then column 1. And right now I have null values because I haven't actually typed anything in, so they're empty. And we can use this for the step where I check whether or not there is a value. Then I've also loaded in the table where I haven't done any transformations. Normally you would, which would depend on the kind of data you have. So my output is not completely finished. I've done a little preparation beforehand. What I'm saying is, if the filter name, that is this value, if that is a null and the filter value is null, then I want to grab the last step, which is just the table which I've gotten from up here. And this will be changed in a bit. I'm just showing the template. After that, after I've confirmed that they aren't both null, I'm checking if the filter name is null. Then I want to filter my value column based on the filter value. And if my filter name isn't null, then the else portion will run, which is then I want to select rows, that is filter, where the name is equal to the filter name. So now I have to actually add in this portion where I say if both are empty, then I want some kind of error message. And there's a lazy way to do it, and there's a smart way to do it. The lazy way, which I will do off screen, it turned out I didn't need to try otherwise. I can simply say if both the filter name is null and the filter value is null, that is, these two values are empty, then I'll simply return the text silly Billy. So when I load this into my spreadsheet, I'll just get one column with the output silly Billy. The problem with the lazy method is that if I have other things in this sheet, so these two values or another table, then they will be pushed. That is, they will be shoved to the columns to the right when this table expands, because right now there's only one column. And when I update this properly, which should be banana, when I update this, so the problem was I don't have a column named name, but it's named item instead. And likewise, my column is named item number. So I have to change this from filter name is null, then that should be item. Yes. So when I load this, my columns will be shifted to the right, which is annoying and a problem. This isn't a problem, and it's okay to do this method, the lazy method, if you have the table on its own sheet. But what I need to do right now is I want to have an easy option for my user to filter. You could just use this filter, the normal table filter, but maybe you want to minimize how much data you load, because there's no point in loading 400,000 rows if you only need one row. And that's almost the example I need at my workplace. The smart method is a lot more complicated, especially if you have a lot of columns. So this is prone to errors if you have a varying amount of columns, or if they change name, then you might want to reconsider this. What I'm going to do is first add a new step, because this is simply more convenient for reading. And then I need to make sure that up here in my last step, these two steps, these two else statements, they need to refer to the source step and not the prior step. So I just have to change this, and this is because Power Query is smart enough to change the name. When you change the name of steps, they also get changed within the code you've written, which is very nice, but not what I need right now. So in this custom step, I need to basically delete all the rows in the table and then add a new row where I have a value in the first column and then blank in the other columns. And this is where I say if you have a lot of columns, then this becomes annoying. But right now we only have 3 columns, so it's not that bad. What I need to do is to use the table.InsertRows method, which takes a table argument, and that table is going to be the first n number of rows from my source step. So I'm saying I want to grab the first x amount of rows from this table, the original table, and then after that I want to insert rows. But I actually want 0 rows from my prior table, so I can just say, hey, I want to get the first 0 rows from my table, and if I just delete the table insert row part, then we can see what happens here. I just get a table with no rows, but you'll notice that I have the columns, which is exactly what I need. So like before, I'll use the table.InsertRows function, which takes the last step as an argument. So first we have the source table, where I then use the table FirstN function to grab no rows, and then on that table I want to insert a row. And that row is going to be on index 0, so it will be the first row, and then I have to pass in all of the columns. And like I said, this can be tricky when you have a lot of columns, which I figured out today. So we need to pass that, and then in square brackets we need to pass in a list of all the columns we have. So actually I'm going to make this a little easier to read. So in here we have to refer to each column, and if that column is, if it has a space, then you need to do the hashtag quotation marks syntax. So just to have consistency, I'm going to use that syntax. So hashtag quotation mark, name of the first column, quotation mark, equals, and then the value, which is just going to be. And now all we need to do is separate that with a comma and repeat for the next 2 columns. We don't want an actual value, so we'll just use quotation marks for an empty string. This also means you need the columns to have a data value that allows text. If they don't allow text, then you need to pass in maybe a 0 or something else. I haven't tested that out. So this is a good example of how when you record yourself, you start making mistakes. Yes. So now we have a table with the original table's columns and 1 value in the first row and nothing in the other 2 columns. That's just empty. And the beauty is, because Power Query is lazy, if this first step fails, that is, if filter name is not null and filter value is not null, then this second step won't run. This only happens if this condition is met. So it doesn't actually matter, this won't be run, not that it would take very much power to do. Yeah, so now we can just test it out and say, hey, if I type in banana, it will filter on banana when we refresh. And if I type in water bottle and update, it will update. And if we instead use the item number, which would be 14, and refresh, then we get a British water bottle. And if we have both, then if you have 2 values that are conflicting, then depending on how you set up the if function, you'll either filter on the item or on the item number. So you'd want to consider which is more important. Or maybe you would want to have a check to see if these 2 are different. But really you shouldn't have a situation. You should either filter on the item or on the item number. And like I said before, because we now have a fixed amount of columns, we always have 3 columns no matter if there's a mistake or not. This also means I can put my named ranges back where I want them. So if I just delete these 2 and update, Right. Yeah, so that it would help if inside Power Query I would refer to the past step, like I said. So I want to call custom2, and now it works. Yeah, so this is why you always want to make sure you test many times, because you're going to forget something. You always will. Every single time. Yep, so that works, and leaving nothing in. Yeah, it will extend the column, which I think you can live with. And then if you want to be extra smart, then you could, if you're updating the Power Query as a macro, you could always test, hey, is the value in A9, is that the error message? Then you can do something. So maybe you want to have a pop-up that says, hey, this is the most likely error, or if you want to be extra fancy, you could add more error messages depending on what might happen. Maybe you have a wrong number of columns in the data file you use, but yeah, that's for you to figure out.